Welcome back to another episode of Jessica Ella Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Ella. And in today's episode, we are in another part of the How I Healed series, and we're going to be talking about all things self-worth. I want to start by talking about where I was at when I had less than zero self-worth. I used to explain it as feeling like I was like less than a piece of dirt on the bottom of somebody's shoe, which is a very bad way to feel about yourself. And I want to start by explaining the way that I felt, because some of you are probably feeling that way right now. Some of you probably can relate to a lot of what I'm about to say. And I do want you to know that it does get better. But I guess the way that having low self-worth affected me, it rippled into every single area of life. I didn't like the way that I looked physically. I was constantly comparing myself to other women. And I didn't value myself enough to even actually look after myself. There were years where I actually didn't even brush my hair, it sounds wild to me now, but it just felt like looking after myself I just couldn't do it. There was like periods where brushing my teeth would be hard, where I wasn't looking after my skin. I wasn't drinking any water. There was periods where, I would hold on to going to the toilet for ages. I would hold on to my wee because I just wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't connected to my body, and I didn't value my body in any way, shape, or form. This low self-worth just caused me to not look after myself, to then further hate the version of myself that I saw when I looked in the mirror. I would pick apart every single thing, every single perceived flaw. I would just think that I was just ugly and disgusting. And because I had such low self-worth, I was stooped over. Like I was hunched over and my shoulders were like folding in. I was starting to get this hump on the back of my neck because I was always trying to be smaller, always trying to shrink, always trying to kind of, I guess, protect myself. And it just then rippled into more self-hate. It was like, look at your posture. Your posture's disgusting. Like, why can't you stand up straight? Why, and I just would constantly criticize myself for everything, every way that I looked, but also everything that I said. I would overanalyze every conversation that I would have with a friend. Is that what I should have said? And I should have done this. And I'm not a good enough friend. And I didn't, I would just analyze every single thing that I was doing and saying all the time in every situation, business, friendships, relationships. And everything came back to this belief of like, I'm just not good enough. I'm just not enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not successful enough. I'm just not enough. And the thing is, the more that you feed into that with negative thoughts and feelings and you focus on it, the more evidence you find. And the more evidence you find, the more and more you're going to believe that it's true. And the more that you believe it's true, the more you're going to focus on it. And it is just this vicious circle where you just don't believe that you deserve anything. And my worth was so low that the things that I tolerated and accepted in relationships, like I didn't think that I was worth being treated nicely. I didn't think I was worth being showered with love or gifts or time or attention or anything. I just accepted the bare minimum from my relationships. I accepted the bare minimum from everyone and from everything. And I didn't ask anyone for anything because I didn't believe that I deserved it. And this is where that low self-worth comes into play. It's like, I don't deserve to spend money on myself. I don't deserve to spend time on myself. I don't deserve to be loved. I don't deserve to be looked after and cared for. And when that's your narrative, you're just existing. There's no life. There's no excitement because you're just literally there to exist for other people in context to other people. And so this low self-worth started very young for me, but this low self-worth, people think that it just affects one area of their life. And most commonly they focus on the physical. They're like, I have low self-worth because I don't like my body or I don't like the way that I look. But I can almost guarantee that also ripples into that they criticize themselves about the way that they work or the way that they run their business or the way that they are in a relationship. Low self-worth ripples into every area of your life. It gets its tentacles in everywhere. And the lower that it gets, Again, it's like this cycle where it just gets lower and lower and lower, the longer that you don't address it. The lowest, most self-abandoning moment of my life was actually, for me, the moment that started to turn it all around. Because when I had started dating my now ex-husband, we were only a few months into the relationship. And I remember him saying to me, like, I remember saying to him, you know, you don't really spend any time with me. You're always out partying and with your friends, and we don't spend any time together. And he said to me, if you're going to be needy, I'll break up with you. And in that moment, I abandoned every need that I had. And at this point, my bar was pretty low. All I wanted was a boyfriend at the time that just wanted to spend time with me, wanted to actually hang out with me, and, you know, was my friend and wanted to do things with me. And it was a pretty small ask. But when he said that, I moved into this realm of, why am I so needy? And it turns out, actually, I wasn't needy at all. I was just asking bare minimum, but it pushed me into starting to look at myself and at why I am the way that I am. And I actually started working on myself for him. I actually started working on myself to be the best version of myself so that he wouldn't leave me, which is a really bad way to get started. It's, you know, we should be doing it for us. But at the time, I was actually doing it for him. And because that was the way that the relationship started, there was this pattern that continued that I can think of hundreds of times that I abandoned myself to stay in that relationship, to stay in that marriage. But it was also the catalyst for me to start looking at myself, for me to start looking at why I was the way that I was. And I think it's really hard sometimes to pinpoint where it started. A lot of people will say, you know, I lost my self-worth in this relationship, or I lost my self-worth when I put on weight, or I lost my self-worth when I lost my job. And they can pinpoint when they had self-worth and when they lost the self-worth. And for me, it was never created. And if you have complex trauma and you're listening to this, you can probably relate to the fact that people will say to you, you know, think back to a time when you were happy, or think back to a time when you were confident, or think back to a time when you felt calm and safe, and you have no point of reference. And I had no point of reference for when I had high self-worth and I lost it, because it was taken from me before I even ever had a chance to develop it. There was no pivotal moment so much as there was like this conditioning all throughout my childhood from as early as I can remember that was, you're not enough, you're too this, you're too loud, you're too much, you're too excited, you need to calm down, or you're too angry, or you're too whatever it is that was being said to me verbally by my father or my stepfather or kids in school, as well as this undercurrent of, I knew that I was required to put my father's needs above my own. I knew that what I wanted and what I wanted to say and what I felt didn't matter compared to him. And so I learnt unconsciously that him and everyone else was up here and I was down here. And if there was a scale, they were on the top and I was always on the bottom. And that was how I was raised. And so if I'm being completely honest, self-worth has been the hardest thing to rebuild. Like, I can process the trauma and I can shift the beliefs and I can do all of the things, but actually looking after myself and actually sticking to habits and patterns that would reflect high self-worth and choosing to put myself first, and just this level of of worth in myself has been one of the hardest things, to the point where actually even this weekend, it's such a small example, but I'm going to tell it to you because I think it's relevant. Gav, my partner, and I we went for a lot of bushwalks. And when we were on the path, we would come up to other people and they would be coming towards us. And so you would move into like single file so that you could both get past each other. And what he noticed and what he said to me was that you don't just move to one side of the path so that the other people can get past you. I got all the way off the path. Like I jumped off the path, sometimes into the bushes, sometimes into like the mud. I went all the way off the path to give these other people the whole path to walk past me when all I really needed to do was move to the side. And he kept pointing it out to me and I kept doing it. And then I started to notice that I was doing it. And I said to him, it's so reflective of how I'm so used to, if somebody else has a need, for them it was just so very simple to walk on the path in the opposite direction to us. But if somebody else has a need, and I just get right out of the way so that they can have exactly what they want. And it actually took like a lot on that walk for me to, when people were coming, to just go into a single file and to not get all the way off the path. And it just reminded me how it's just a small little habit, but I was doing that in every area of my life all day, every single day. Like, don't be an inconvenience to anybody. Don't say anything. Don't speak up. Don't have a need. Just focus on what everybody else wants. And it wore me down very quickly. But I notice now that there are these little habits, and that it does take so much time to really notice where it creeps back in, whether it's not doing enough self-care or whether it's not respecting your boundaries. Really noticing, how that self-worth is showing up in your everyday life is going to give you like little ways that you can start to work on it. And for me, it's now like staying on the path. But there might be other ways that you notice that you just get out of the way because you believe that you are less than other people. And this is really what it comes down to. That worth is unconsciously saying, when you think about self-worth, there's this unconscious thing of like, okay, there's this hierarchy and other people are up here and I'm down here, and they're more than and I'm less than. And whether that hierarchy is like they're more successful, I'm less successful, they're more beautiful, I'm less beautiful. We have all of these different categories and rankings, but there's this idea there that you are underneath or below other people. And it is one of those things that once it's conditioned into you, it is really hard to not slip back into, especially as a mum, because it's very easy to put your kids' needs above your own because they require you to survive. And we should be looking after our children in that way. But even then, I think that a mum who is filling herself up, filling her cup up, who is, confident and powerful and believes that she's important, is then a great example to her children. So we're always showing them by our actions what we think about ourselves, and therefore what they should think about themselves. From the outside, a lot of the time it would have looked like to people that I was actually confident in certain areas. So I definitely hid behind success. I hid behind businesses. This business is my 4th or 5th business that I've had since my 20s. I definitely was hiding behind success, and I was showing up as very capable. And for me, success was this, like, if I can become successful and earn a certain amount of money, then I will be able to, have these beauty treatments and look beautiful, and I'll be able to have the time to exercise and do. And for me, it was just always like, once I get the success, everything else will click into place. And that's not obviously how it works, but there were people as well that could see through that, because I did walk around with these hunched over shoulders, and I did retract, I was afraid of confrontation. I did avoid, I was just a chronic people pleaser. And I think that anybody who was truly confident would realize that I wasn't. But I do think that there are a lot of people out there who, they're perceived from the outside as confident, but they actually internally have a low level of self-worth. And the way that I think about this now is, if you think, oh, well, I've got pretty good self-worth, I'm very confident. There is a big difference between confidence and in your ability to do things and worth, because confidence, you can show up confident in your abilities in your job, but you can still feel that feeling of worthlessness. You can still feel like you don't deserve it. You can still feel those feelings even though you've got that confidence there. And this is that thing that people don't realize, is that some of us from those beliefs and from those wounds, it will show up as very obvious as people who say like, oh, I'm not sure, and I'm not very confident, and I'm really shy, and I'm not very good at that. And they're always putting themselves down. But then there are people as well that move more into a protective state where they pretend that they know everything, and they can almost be arrogant, and they can almost be people that we are kind of like, ugh, we don't want to be around them because they're a know everything, and they know, they're a bit of a know-it-all, and they're really loud and overly confident. But some of those people actually can have that really low self-worth, and especially successful people, because I think, you're pushing and pushing and pushing to try and prove something. And in that process, you're not looking after yourself. To me, the biggest indication that somebody has high self-worth is that they look after themselves. Like, that to me is the baseline. If somebody is prioritizing the things that they love, they're looking after themselves physically, they're putting good foods into their body, they're exercising, they're like doing everything to make themselves feel good, and they're able to say no to people when they don't want to do something, they're sticking to their boundaries, they're chasing their dreams. All of those things to me say this person has high self-worth because they believe that they deserve to be looked after. Those people who look out from the outside successful but are abandoning all of their needs, like me in the past, running this successful business but not brushing my hair, not looking after myself properly, never eating the right foods, skipping meals. I would sometimes only eat one meal a day to the point where I was shaking, not listening to my body, never able to stop because I didn't believe that I deserved rest. It was like, you don't deserve to rest until you're successful. You don't deserve to rest until you've made X amount of money or until you've got X amount of accolades. And that again is very low self-worth because you're seeking it from something else. And this is the same with a lot of women. Like, I'm not worthy unless I'm at this weight on the scales. I'm not worthy unless I look a certain way. And for as long as you attach some sort of measure to your worth, you have low self-worth, because self-worth, like true self-worth, says I'm worthy just because I exist. I'm worthy just because I'm me. I don't have to do anything, achieve anything. I am just worthy just because I am. And so that level of self-worth doesn't cause you to push the boundaries and to exhaust yourself and to not be able to say no and to go on all of those different paths that I just mentioned. That level of self-worth doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. And you don't need to prove anything to anybody. We're here for our own existence. We're here to live our own lives. And this is why self-worth and what other people think of you are so highly tied together, because people who care so much about what other people think of them generally have low self-worth because they're looking at somebody else to validate them in, oh, am I enough? Am I enough? Is this enough? Is that enough? Am I smart enough? Am I pretty enough? They care what other people think because they think that those people's opinions make them worthy. And what happens is, if you're getting all of these compliments of people like, oh, you're so skinny, you're so beautiful, you're so successful, and then those compliments stop, the source of what you were using to build this fake self-worth disappears, and you don't have this base level of worth internally because you were just getting it from something else. You were getting it from success or from compliments or from other people. And I always say to successful people, or to any people that are wanting to work on their self-worth, if I took away everything that makes you special or makes you successful, would you still be worthy? And for me, it's like, okay, if I lost my business, if I went bankrupt and I lost my business and I lost everything, would I still be worthy? Would I still be a worthy, important person? Yes, I would, because I have that feeling internally. But a lot of people are holding on to something so tightly thinking this is what makes me worthy. And the number one thing that people do this with is love. And this is why we end up with people with really intense anxious attachment styles, because it's like, if he loves me, then I'm worthy. If he's treating me nicely, then I'm worthy. If he's saying that I'm beautiful, then I'm beautiful. But if he stops saying that, are you still beautiful? Well, no. So many women think no. Well, he doesn't compliment me anymore. He doesn't desire me anymore, doesn't take me on beautiful dates anymore. Therefore, I must not be worthy of that. But what's happening is they're taking that worth and that measure of worth from somebody else's actions. And this is where in relationships, like obviously we want to be treated a certain way, and it's nice to be told that you're beautiful and desired and taken on beautiful dates. But when you use that as your measure for worth, when it stops happening, you get very triggered because you feel that feeling of worthlessness. And so we have to learn how to build it up inside of ourselves and have it as this internal thing that we're holding on to without anybody else's input. I had so many beliefs about worth and about what I was worth, and also about being worthy of love. And I think that this belief, this core belief of I'm not worthy of love, really was cemented in my childhood, and it really rippled into every relationship that I had. And not just love, but of like this safe, consistent love, this healthy love. And having this belief that I wasn't worthy of love caused me to look for it, as I just mentioned before, in so many different places. I looked for this feeling, this love and this worthy feeling in love in other people. I looked for it in men because I didn't get it from my dad. And so I was constantly trying to find it in relationships, to the point where I had a therapist say to me, you know, it's almost like you don't exist unless you are being observed by a man. Like, even if you have beautiful friendships and you have, you know, your family and you have your kids, it's like you almost don't exist unless you're being validated by the man that you're in a romantic relationship with, which at the time was my ex-husband. And it was very true. I looked at the ways in which I felt like I didn't exist unless he was acknowledging me, unless he was validating me, unless he was loving me. And I started to work on this belief of I'm not worthy of love, and I identified it. And I started to look at, well, what makes me not worthy of love? And I started to write down, what are all the things that I think make me not worthy of love? And I started journaling down all of these different things about myself. And I realized that they were things that people had told me or experiences that I had, and they weren't actually real things. They were just things that I'd collected over time. And then I started to look at where did I first start to believe that I wasn't worthy of love? And obviously for me, this linked back to my dad and abuse. And I started to link it back to there and started to change the way that I saw those interactions. And instead of believing that I wasn't worthy of love, I started to change those memories and the narrative that I had in those memories to, he didn't know how to give me that love. He didn't know how to love me right. He didn't know how to love his daughter. It wasn't that I wasn't worthy of it. It was that he didn't know how to give it. And so I went back and I told my inner child, I told that little girl, you are worthy of love. He just doesn't know how. And so I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to show that to you. I'm going to give you that example. And you know, took her out of that home and gave her a different experience. And this was really what started to build up this belief that I was worthy of love. But below that, I still needed to find this sense of worth in myself that wasn't attached to a romantic love. Because when I attached it to romantic love, I would still become anxious when I felt like they were pulling away, or when I felt like something was going on in the relationship. It would shake my worth because I was still basing it off my connection to them. So again, we have to come back and we have to actually look at it on an even deeper level, like on this individual level, not in context to anybody else, which can be a really difficult thing to do because we're so conditioned to connect, our worth with how many people love us and with how deeply we're loved and how we're being treated. And so I started to look at all of the beliefs around worth as well as an individual, not just around being worthy of love. And there were these beliefs there around, I don't matter. I'm less than other people. I'm not important. No one thinks of me. No one wants to, no one, just these other beliefs that were even more deeply about who I am, not in context to other people, but about who I am at my core. And I think that especially when you've been raised by, somebody who is a criminal who's living in these dingy houses and, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so we were wearing, not clothes that the cool kids were wearing. And we were like, always felt like we were less than. It was more than just this relationship. It was like feeling like on a hierarchy, you're lower than everybody else. And I started to work with hierarchies and I started to look at what is a hierarchy and what is this measure of worth. And this is where I started to really blow things wide open because I realized that the measure, the hierarchy, is based off these people are up here and then there's these people in the middle and then there's these people down the bottom. And we're measuring it off different things with different people or different groups of people. So I was like, wait a minute. If if the hierarchy over here is people who are selfless, there's people up the top here who are doing massive change-making organizations in the world and they're doing really good things. And then there's people in the middle who are doing, donating to some charities. And then there's people down the bottom of the hierarchy who do nothing. And then there's this hierarchy of success with these people that earn millions. And then there's these people in the middle and then there's people down the bottom who don't earn anything. But I started to think but somebody could be feel like they're on the lower hierarchy or on the lower end of the scale in one category of life, but then they're up the top in another category of life. And so why are we measuring ourselves against this, society's hierarchy? Like what's making us do that? And what I realized is that it was our beliefs. Our beliefs were actually what was creating our measure of worth. And everybody had different measures of worth. Everybody had different beliefs that were creating that measure. So for me, it was like, I need to earn, this much money in order to be worthy. But the person next to me could be like, I need to earn this much money in order to be worthy. And that could be a quarter of the amount than what I was looking at. So if they could feel worthy earning that much, why couldn't I? And it's because I had this belief that it had to be a certain amount. Well, why did I decide on that amount? Because I just did, because of the people that I saw or because of what I decided in my own brain. And so I started to realize and I started to teach women that you created the hierarchy so you can break down the hierarchy. You created the rules so you can change the rules. If you think I need to weigh this much on the scales in order to be worthy, you decided that number. And why did you decide that number? You can change the number at any time to the number you are right now, and then you're worthy right now. But we think, oh no, I can't do that because I won't look good and I won't da-da-da-da. All of that comes from your beliefs. All of that comes from these underlying fears and these underlying belief systems that you have. And so I realized that there actually is no measure to worth. There is no universal bar that we're all measuring ourselves against, because we're measuring ourselves against our own subconscious mind. Our subconscious is telling us, you need to do X, Y, Z in order to be worthy. But the person next to us, their subconscious is saying something different. It's saying they need to do A, B, C in order to be worthy. And so you can actually change the criteria. And this is what I started to do. It was like, okay, why am I pushing towards this thing? Why do I think that I need this thing in order to be worthy? Where does that come from? And I'd unpack it and I'd change the beliefs until I started to believe that I already was worthy right now, exactly as I am with no changes required. And people think like, oh, I can't do that because I'm not successful, or I'm overweight, or I don't have a relationship, or I've been single for so many years. And it's like, you actually can. It's only your belief that you have to be in a relationship and you have to be in order to be worthy. That's a belief. You can remove that belief and be worthy right now, and you'll probably actually magnetize the relationship that you want. You'll probably attract somebody. But I think that we forget that we're making the bar, we're making the criteria, and we can change it at any time. I think one of the pivotal moments that I realized that my worth had started to build, and I could no longer keep betraying myself. I could no longer keep pretending that I was small and pretending that I didn't deserve more than what I was receiving, was definitely in my marriage with my ex-husband. And, you know, there were needs that I had that I always felt like anything that I asked for was too much. I always felt like I was asking so much, but in my soul, I knew that I was not asking for too much. I was asking for things that seemed to be normal and easy in other relationships. And so there was a pivotal moment for me where I realized that my needs were never going to be met in this relationship. My needs were always going to be too much for him. And I remember reading this thing that said, you know, what is too much for one person will just come naturally to another. And that is so true. There's things that Gav does now just by being himself that are things that I would beg for in the past. And I realized that I got to this point where I realized that I can't keep saying that I'm building my power and that I'm building my worth and accept the treatment that I'm getting right now. And I just decided that it was out of alignment now with who I'd created, because I'd created this version of myself that I was like, I am worthy and I'm powerful and I'm strong and I'm enough and I'm important. And then I was not in a real life situation that reflected those beliefs back to me. And I got to the point, and you will get to this point too, where you won't question it anymore. You won't be like they're not treating me well, and so maybe I don't deserve it. You'll get to the point where you're like, no, I deserve this. Give it to me or I'm out. Give it to me or I'm done. And I had a similar moment with my health and with looking after myself, and realizing that, you know, I would say that I'd built this high self-worth, but I still wasn't looking after myself in the way that I should. I still wasn't doing the things that I should be doing to look after my nervous system or to, you know, continue my healing. And so I had that moment again where it was like, if you're not looking after yourself, if I'm not looking after myself as well as I'm looking after my children, if I'm not, you know, meeting all of my own needs, then I don't have as high self-worth as what I say I do. And I'm very good at calling myself out. I'm very good at looking at if my actions don't align with what I'm saying and making sure that I do that work to align it again. And so they were some big moments where I realized that my worth was actually starting to build, and that I actually couldn't betray myself anymore. And if you're getting to that point where you've been building your worth, but your exterior world doesn't reflect the way that you feel, so you've been working on trying to be more confident and, you know, outspoken and loving yourself, and then there's people around you that are just like, oh, you're so up yourself and you love yourself so much, and they're kind of putting you down and making you feel like what you're doing is wrong. It's a challenge. It's a challenge because it's like an up level. It's like those people are doing that for you to really be challenged on, do you actually have higher self-worth? Have you actually healed? Because if you had, you wouldn't put up with that. It's time to get some new friends. And so there's always these little tests. There's always little tests of like, have you actually done the work? And we see them as this evidence. If we've got all of this past self-worth issues, we see this as evidence. People saying, oh, you know, you think you're so good now. And this little part of us is like, oh, no one's going to like me and I should just go back to the way that I was. And so we retract. But really, this is the moment where you've got to stand in it and stand in that change and say, I am I am too good now. I do love myself. I'm supposed to love myself. It's the most stupid saying when people say, she loves herself so much. It's like, how is that an insult? Are we not supposed to love ourselves? Are we not supposed to love ourselves so much? Like, I think a lot of the insults that people are giving are people with low self-worth, insulting people who have some worth and confidence. And there's a level of jealousy there. So when that starts to happen, it's actually a sign that you're on the right track. If people are pissed off by how confident you are and how much you love yourself and how well you're looking after yourself, it's just reflecting back to them the ways that they're not doing that. It's just reflecting back to them the ways that they're not looking after themselves or that they couldn't be confident and stand up. And it's not evidence that you should shrink back down. It's actually evidence that it's working and that you should keep going and that you should probably tell those people to fuck off, but that you should, I think that it's more evidence that self-worth is actually starting to happen, and stay strong and hold in it. There were so many times that I believed that I was just unlovable or unlikable just by nature, like by who I am. It was like, well, no one has treated you good to this point. Like nobody has liked any version of you, because even when I tried to work on myself, I would be criticized. Like I was too quiet, or I was too loud, or I was lacking in confidence. And I remember past relationships, them saying to me, like, pull your shoulders back, don't hunch over. And then it was like, you'd get a little bit of confidence and they'd be like, oh, you're so cocky. Like, who do you think you are? And just kind of, you couldn't be too big, but you couldn't be too self-criticizing, or you couldn't be too shy. But you weren't allowed to be too loud, but you weren't allowed to be, just this kind of push and pull. And this was what my dad was like. My dad was very like, he was always picking apart the way that I would look, but then and wanting me to be more confident, but if I'd be too confident, he'd say I was too loud, and he'd say I was too annoying, or that I was too much. And then I would go back down into less confidence, and then he would have something else to pick on, or he would pick on my physical appearance. And I spent so many years in relationships where that was the same. Like I remember boyfriends that were like, don't wear that, wear this, that outfit doesn't look as good on you, or you've put on a bit of weight, or and then you'd lose weight and they'd be like, oh, you're looking so skinny, and you should, I remember having my hair really dark and loving my hair really dark, and then this boyfriend saying, like, you don't look good with dark hair, you should dye your hair blonder, you should go lighter. And just always these comments of like, it was kind of like no matter what I did, it was just never enough. Like nothing was ever enough. And I attracted friendships like that. I attracted all of these different relationships, and it just felt like nothing I ever did was enough for anybody, and I could never fit into any of these boxes. And the funny thing here is that, like, I never had to. It was just my own belief that I had to fit into their box in order for them to love me. And I remember saying to my ex-husband actually all the time, like, it feels like there's this little box, and I can't like quite make out what it is, but I know that I'm in it. And I know that like my soul wants to like burst out of it, but I don't know, I don't know how, and I don't know what the box is, but it feels like I'm not me, and it feels like I'm not happy because I'm squished into this tiny little box. And to me, that was like a reflection of me trying to like contort myself to be who everybody else wanted me to be. But everybody wanted me to be someone different, and everybody wanted something different from me. And it was just like, there was never any way that I could please everybody. And it's funny, like just thinking about that now makes me like a little bit emotional, because I remember I like drew the box, and I would talk to him about the box, and I would just feel this like restriction feeling of like putting on a mask and just being someone that I'm not, and knowing that there was like this, my soul was huge, and that I had all of these things that I could be, but I couldn't leave this box. It was like a cage. And now when I think about it, like I can feel that there's no box, and it's the most freeing feeling. But what got me there was starting to become who I wanted to become, and not who everybody else wanted me to be. Starting to be like, and I come up against this all the time still. Like I'll work on, becoming more confident in sales. And then I'll say something, and then one of my friends or someone in my family will be like, oh, that's so salesy. And it will make me go, oh, and I'll like start to retract a little bit. And then I got to the point where I would realize that's their block, because I had that block. They have that block. That's their projection. That's their block. That's their fear. That's their stuff. It's not mine. And as long as what I'm doing is in alignment with what feels good for me, it's like what I'm saying is true to me and I believe it, and I have the highest, greatest intention for other people, it doesn't really matter how they receive it, because how everybody else receives it is up to them. I could say the same thing to you and the exact same thing to 10 other people, and the way that each of those people would receive it is completely different. For instance, I could write myself a sales pitch, and I know there's certain people in my family that would say, oh, that's so salesy. And I know that my partner, who is in sales, would be like, I think you could ramp it up a little bit. I think that you could go harder. Which one's true? Which one's true? And it's the same as when people give you opinions on what you should do with your life and in your relationship, in your love life. One person says, you shouldn't accept that behavior. And another person says, oh, that's not that bad. And another person says, you should speak up. And another person says, you should just let it go. Just let it go. Just don't worry about it. And you get all these different opinions. And what you're actually getting is their subconscious mind. That's their subconscious mind showing what they think you should do based off their beliefs and their experiences and their past. And it has nothing to fucking do with you and your life and what you want and desire. When you have low self-worth, you take on all of that. And if you can imagine how many people you have in your life, and then imagine like how many people you follow on social media and how much information you absorb all day, it's like we have all of these cords coming out of us and all of this information of like, you should do it like this and you should do it like that. And this is how you do this. And this is how you do that. This is how you should live your life. It's just like cutting the cords to all of those things and asking yourself. And this is why self-worth and self-trust and intuition are so tied in together, because creating high self-worth also requires you to come back into yourself and trust your inner knowing and trust your inner compass to be able to guide you. Instead of asking for everyone else's opinion, you feel into what feels good for you and you act on that. That's really hard to do when you've been conditioned to listen to everybody else because you think that you're less than and they're more important and they've got the answers. And it's just not true. Worth for me wasn't something that happened in one big moment. It was something that I built over so many years. It was something that I had to focus on. It was something that I had to look at. I had to be in the front of my mind all the time. And it was like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And what do I actually want? And what do I actually desire? And then why do I think that I can't have that? And it was those questions over and over and over. And it was this slow building. For me, your worth is directly linked to your subconscious beliefs about who you are and what you deserve. Full stop. Like your worth is only that. It is only a collection of subconscious beliefs. And so I started to take every experience, every negative thought that I had about myself, and I would challenge it. And it would be like, okay, you think you look ugly today. Why do you think you look ugly? Where did you first start thinking that you were ugly? Okay, you can't set a boundary. Why can't you set a boundary? Why don't you deserve that? Why don't you deserve the thing that you want? Where did you learn that? And I started to evaluate everything that I was saying and doing from this perspective of what are the subconscious beliefs here about my identity, about who I am and what I deserve. And I started reprogramming all of them. And this is what we focus on in Break Free and Awaken Unconscious, which is the second and third part of the Triggered to Thriving series. It's all about figuring out who you believe that you are, like your identity, because a lot of what our identity is what other people have told us. Our subconscious beliefs are things that we've been told, things that we've experienced, things that people have said to us. We've taken them on and we've believed that they're true. And so a lot of the work in there is actually figuring out your identity and who you are. And a lot of women say to me with low self-worth, I don't even know who I am. I have no idea who I am if I'm not helping other people if I'm not, if I'm not giving to other people, if I'm not in a relationship, if I'm not my career, I have no idea who I am at a core level. No idea. And I always say to them, this is a great place to be. And they're a bit confused. And I say, if you have no idea who you are, you get to design who you want to be. And so I want you to take everything that you don't want to be, everything that you don't like about yourself, and I want you to change those beliefs. So stop believing that you are those things and replace those beliefs with the new things that you do want to believe about yourself. Because the truth is, who you are is who you believe you are. And if you change who you believe you are, you will literally become a different person. I am evidence of this. I told myself that I was shy and that I lacked confidence and that no one listened when I spoke. And now look at me on a podcast. Plenty of people listening. I changed those beliefs of no one cares what I have to say and no one listens to me, and was like, everybody cares what I have to say. And there are people that need my message, and there are people that need me to speak, and, replace it with these beliefs. And all of a sudden it was just like, well, of course I have to do a podcast, of course. And so I start taking new actions, and I start taking, having new thoughts, and I start acting in a completely different way and showing up in a completely different way, because I am essentially a different person, because I've changed my beliefs about who I am. I show up differently. And so when people say to me, oh, I'm just shy, or I just have always had low self-confidence, it's like, you have up until this point because you've believed that you do. So let's change those beliefs and see what you can do. And so this is how we start to work on it, start to uncover, start to literally create a new identity, building up this version of yourself that you want to be, building up this version of yourself who truly believes that she's worthy. It feels every single time that I choose myself, every single time that I catch myself doing something that is maybe reflective of an old version of me, or that feels like I have low self-worth, or that it is starting to slip, every time I find myself catching it and then doing the opposite. So I challenge myself to do the opposite. If I find myself slipping into patterns of overworking, I challenge myself to rest. Or if I find myself, slacking on my self-care, I will challenge myself to start it back up. And it just feels so good. It's you giving that love to yourself. It's you giving the love that you have been seeking from other people to yourself and not requiring it from anybody else. And it feels so good in your body, because it's like this little love note to yourself. It's like this little, like, you deserve it, and it's proving that you deserve it. And it makes you feel powerful. It builds up your strength. It is just the best feeling. Healing self-worth changed everything in my life. When you heal your self-worth, when you focus on building your worth, you go for these bigger opportunities. You start projects that you didn't think you would ever start. What you expect from love and from relationships changes. You start to expect this beautiful, like, I don't know, like Hollywood movie love, because you know that you deserve it. You know that you deserve life to be magical, essentially. And it sounds kind of like cliche, but you do deserve life to feel magical. Like, what's the point of living? What's the point of being here if we're not creating a life that feels good? And so you can't do that until you start to work on that self-worth, and until you start to build it up. And it all comes back to that identity. It all comes back to creating a version of yourself that can receive that, creating a version of yourself that can accept that, and that can hold it too. Because there are also different levels of worth. And I've been working with this recently with getting a lot of like media and press opportunities. And there was a time where every single time I would get an opportunity come my way, I would spiral. And I would be like, oh, it would be exactly what I wanted, but I'd be like, oh, I don't know, like, why do they want to interview me? And like, I don't really know what to say. And, the bigger the publication, the bigger the resistance. And it was like, I don't deserve this. Like, I'm just Jess. Like, why do they want to interview me? What's so special about me? And there was a part of me that knew, and it was like, well, I'm putting my story out there and this is what I'm trying to do. But when this when it requires this next level version of you, to show up in a different way, to be more confident than you've been before, to have more conviction, to have more self-worth, it starts to shake you a little bit. And at each level, there's this saying, new level, new devil. I think at each level, you find these new beliefs that were sort of tucked away that were just stopping you from getting to this next level of self-worth. And for me, in every category of life, it looks like feeling the fear and doing it anyway, which is why I say that this is a podcast for brave women, because there's been plenty of times where my self-worth kicked back in and it was like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this opportunity. I don't deserve this love from Gav. I don't deserve this life that I'm getting to live. It's this beautiful, magical life. I don't deserve it. This is it's too much. I don't deserve it. And then I notice the thoughts and I notice the feelings, and then I do a healing on myself and I release whatever it is that's coming up subconsciously, whatever the thoughts and beliefs are that are driving that. And then I just move on and I do the thing anyway, even if it feels uncomfortable. And to the point now where the other day yesterday actually it was, I got asked to be on a podcast, probably one of the biggest ones that I've ever been asked to be on. And I didn't feel any resistance in my body at all. And I actually celebrated a little bit with Gav last night, because it was like my worth has increased to the point now where I expect that. And I can hold that, and I know that I deserve that. And so there's no resistance there. And it's taken a lot of work to get to that point. And so if you're at the lower end of this and you just can't accept any help, you can't accept even a compliment. I never used to be able to accept a compliment. Anytime somebody would say something nice to me, I'd be like, no, don't say that. Or I would push the compliment away. I just couldn't, I couldn't handle a compliment, whether it was about my work ethic or about physical, I just could not handle a compliment. If you're starting that at that point and you can't even handle a compliment, just look at why. What does it bring up inside of you? What do you feel when somebody gives you a compliment? And why do you think that whatever it is that they're saying isn't true? And who taught you that? And where did you learn that? And why do you believe that? And start to really get curious about these things. And you start with the little things and they build up in not so long to the big things. The biggest lie that people believe about self-worth is that it's built through purely acts of self-love. People think that self-worth and self-love are the same thing. So they'll be like, self-love, I'm going to get a face mask today, or self-love, I'm going for a walk, or, people think that alone is self-love. But self-love and self-worth is so much deeper than that. It is like a true deep love for who you are. And it's this feeling of I used to think I have to be me. I hate that I have to be me. And now I think I get to be me. I get to be Jess. I get to wake up and live Jess's life, and I get to be me. That level of that's the level of self-worth that we're going for. And people think that self-worth is about what it looks like from the outside more than what it feels like on the inside. And it is so much more about what it feels like than what it looks like. You can't measure worth in relation to anything on a scale. Coming back to that, it has to be a feeling that you feel inside. And the feeling that you feel inside is this deservingness and is this excitement to be who you are. So self-worth, really, if you break it down, is identity work. And self-love are the acts that you take that reflect this identity that you've created. The thing that I am working on at the moment, and the thing that I think is really reflective of self-worth at every level really, is being worthy to rest in a culture where it is go, go, go and achieve and achieve and achieve and do, do, do. There is so much to be said for, especially women, being worthy to rest, being worthy to take time for yourself and to look after yourself. And I know now that the part of me that wants to rush, and the part of me that wants to stay busy, and the part of me that wants it all done now, is this scarcity of time's limited and resources are limited and you've got to rush, rush, rush. And when we slip into that, we slip into pleasing and into looking outside of ourselves. And I think when we rest, we have that time to come back in and to remember, like, what matters to me? What do I actually want? What do I desire? And we have the space and the time to actually start to follow that. For the people who are listening who feel invisible, not enough, not important, worthless, unseen, unheard, for the people that were raised with all of those words and those beliefs and those feelings of like, nobody cares, nobody's there for me, you know, I'm completely alone or isolated, for people who are sitting there thinking, I'm so far away from any sense of worth, I want to say to you that you really don't have to. It can just be one small step at a time. You don't need to be building self-worth to the point of where I'm at now or where anyone else that is on Instagram, but you need to be building it one tiny step more than you were yesterday. You need to be looking at one belief, one thought process. And you know, it can seem really overwhelming when you have a lot of complex trauma and there are so many memories and the worth is so low. But the fact that you're listening to this podcast tells me that you do want more. The fact that you've even clicked on this and that you're listening to this tells me that you actually do care about building your worth. And one of the biggest blocks that I do find in women with really low self-worth is, you know, we have this program, Triggered to Thriving, which is literally this roadmap. It's, you know, where I started as regulate is where I was panicked. I was triggered all of the time. I was completely, you know, dissolved into my trauma. There was no Jess and trauma. It was just like intertwined in every part of me. To go from this like low self-worth, chronic like survival state, it takes you all the way through to where I am now. It takes you through like reclaiming your power and, you know, living in the flow and finding healthy, safe love. It goes through all of those steps. And so many women who are where I was look at it and they know that it's going to help them. And this part of them that feels like they're not worthy stops them from enrolling. It stops them from doing the thing that they want to do because we don't even believe at this point that we're worth investing money into. It's like, I don't even, that low self-worth is what gets you. It's what stops you from actually purchasing something that's going to help you. It stops you from then watching it. You might purchase it, but you never watch it. It stops you from doing all of those things because what it is it's you just realigning with the belief that you don't deserve it. You don't deserve help. You don't deserve to get better. You don't deserve to spend money on yourself. You don't deserve any of that. And so this is the beliefs that is stopping women from actually being able to get help. And there's a number of women that have been able to move through that barrier and they're doing some amazing work in there. But I just want you to know that like that there is help there available. There is guidance and there are steps and there is so much information and healing that can be done in that program. You just have to do it one step at a time, one belief at a time, 10 minutes of a module at a time. Like there is healing available, but you just have to start. I want to thank you for listening to this episode. And if you are struggling with that low self-worth, I want you to know that there is help available. You can also book in with any of the women in the online clinic. They are all so good at working with all of the beliefs that are causing this low self-worth. And I want you to know that the part of you that thinks that this low self-worth is, you know, we often use the low self-worth to beat ourselves up. So you might listen to this podcast and be like, oh, she said everything she said, I do that. I've got such low self-worth. I hate myself. That's your self-worth again coming in. They're saying, you know, you've got low self-worth and you're beating yourself up because you have low self-worth, and it is just this spiral. And so I just want you for one moment, if you're feeling that way, to get curious and to think, okay, that's my low self-worth coming in, beating myself up. What else could be true? Yes, I have identified with all of the list of things, and I have identified that I do have very low self-worth and I don't take good care of myself. What's one thing that I can do today to take one tiny step forward? And where did I learn to beat myself up in this way? Where did I learn to put myself down in this way? Who taught me that? Start to journal on these things and just take that one small step. And all you have to do is take one small step each day and you will get there. So I want to thank you again for listening. And if you haven't already, subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on. It really helps me when you subscribe or you leave a comment on this podcast episode if you loved it. Share it with friends. It helps me to keep recording and keep this podcast free and ad-free, and just to give you as much help and guidance as I possibly can. So I will see you in the next episode.